we've got three speakers this evening. Our keynote speaker is Professor Andy Goldson, who is the author of the Mini Stone Review for the Sheffield City region. We have Professor Chego Maximinovich, we nearly got it right, from the Imperial College of London and the Blue Green Dream. And finally, but not last, is Charles Perkins of ITM Power, which is going to be speaking about energy storage and clean fuel. And if we can start with you, please, Andy. Oh, sorry. You all right without that?
Yeah, it's fine. Well, hello. I'm Andy Goldson. I'm recently moved from the University of Leeds to the University of Bristol. And 2 or 3 years ago, we prepared a report for the Sheffield City region area, looking at the kind of economic case for investing in the low-carbon economy. Actually, since then, we've gone on to work in loads of cities all around the world, and this is the first time I've looked at UK cities for a while, so it's quite kind of nice to come back home after being in Lima and Calcutta and different places. The stories are kind of similar, actually, but we can talk about that later if you want to. So this is the report, published in 2011-12, I think. Still available online at that web address. And what I'm going to do today is reintroduce some of the themes from that report and the key findings. And in broad terms, they said this is the scale of the economic opportunity for Sheffield City region to invest in low carbon development. These are how many jobs you could create in the low carbon goods and services sector from making those investments. And this is the kind of scale of the carbon cuts that could be made to Sheffield City region's emissions if you made those investments. And the headline stories were, big, talking about billions of pounds of investment. But instead of focusing on the kind of big story, I'm going to zoom in on two key questions of, is it realistic and how do you do it? Actually, how could you begin to fund these kind of low carbon development plans? And I'll make reference to a couple of cases which I hope will show that it's absolutely realistic and it could be done, just needs a bit of institutional innovation perhaps. So the headline findings of the report from a couple of years ago. So, sorry, the population is actually not billion, is it? It's million, I think. I guess it'd be a bit more crowded. So, as you can see, Sheffield City region has a population of 1.8 million, an economy worth 26 billion, which is about 2 or 3% of UK GDP, and a yearly energy bill of 3.4 billion. And forecasting that forward, we found, even with a kind of reasonably conservative estimate of future energy prices, that the energy bill for the city region would grow to 4.6 billion by 2022. So that is an enormous leakage of money out of the city's economy, to pay for energy. And it gives you some idea of the scale of the economic challenge and, the opportunity to begin to address that. We then looked at all of the low carbon things that could be done in the Sheffield City region. And these were across the housing sector, so very practical things like insulating lofts and double glazing houses and solid wall insulation. Some small-scale renewables, solar PV and wind, micro wind were included in the analysis. And then roughly the same for non-domestic buildings, which could either be public sector buildings like, I guess this one, kind of hybrid, aren't they, universities, but hospitals, schools, that kind of thing, and private sector buildings, office blocks and swimming pools and others. We did the same for the transport sector, so replacing one kind of vehicle with a more fuel-efficient vehicle, investing in some demand-side things like cycling lanes, and in some public transport measures. And then also for industry, where we looked at, obviously these are a bit more technical and industry-specific, all the energy efficiency and low-carbon stuff that could happen in the industry that's in the Sheffield City region area. So in total, I think we assessed about 100 different measures. And in all cases, we looked at the cost of buying the measure. How much does a solar panel cost? The cost of installing and then running the measure for the rest of its lifetime. and then the energy savings that would come from that measure over the lifetime that it was in use. And what we found was that the Sheffield City region could spend £3.7 billion on cost-effective measures. So these are measures that would pay for themselves or more over their lifetime. So that's a huge amount of money, obviously, and a massive investment opportunity. And if that happened, those investments would generate annual savings of nearly £750 million. And so they would pay for themselves in, 5 years or thereabouts. And at the same time, they would reduce the emissions, or help to reduce the emissions, by up to 40%. So other factors in there, reducing emissions, are background trends. So actually, year on year, the economy gets about 1.5% more energy efficient every year. And in some sectors, such as housing, energy use is actually falling really quickly. I'll explain that in a second. Plus, on top of that, we have forecast price increases. So as energy prices go up, people tend to use less energy, and that comes with other problems like fuel poverty for some communities and households. But the price impacts of increased energy prices, and these still hold true even with lower oil prices at the moment, would also lead to a reduction in energy demand. Put that together with these investments and you would have a 40% decarbonised city region by 2022 if you spent this money in broad terms. Then what we found was if you kind of captured the savings from those massive investments and reinvested them in more low carbon stuff, you could add to that. And that would generate another £3 billion in the next 6 or 7 years. So this issue of capturing and recycling savings, really does lead to huge levels of inward investment or extra investment into the local economy. And that would generate savings of another £100 million a year, again kept in the local economy, and that all of that together would reduce emissions by 44% by 2022, which is kind of ahead of, or roughly on track with, national carbon reduction commitments. If all of that happened, then we estimated, and this was a fairly robust estimate, that would create around 6,000 jobs. Electricians fitting solar panels, builders cladding buildings, mechanics servicing new kind of energy, new kind of vehicles, and so on. So that's an enormous job creation possibility. And I suppose our argument was, even if you don't care about climate change, and I really hope you do, but this is a massive economic opportunity and an employment creating opportunity, and it should be central to the city council and the city region and the LEP and all of that stuff as an economic opportunity. And the byproduct, if it is a byproduct, is that it generates massive carbon savings too. So those carbon savings look like this, and it took us a year to do the study, so we haven't been able to update these for today. So the top line is the business as usual trend. What happens in the city region to energy, this is the carbon emissions, if you just don't do anything and carry on as normal. And we found there that between 1990, which is the base year that we measure these things against, and 2022, emissions would fall by 6% if you do nothing. However, on top of that, we then have energy prices, and the energy price increases would add another 10% to that. Then we would have reductions from decarbonising the grid. So electricity supply in the UK is becoming less carbon intensive, and that means the electricity consumed in Sheffield creates less carbon impacts, and all of that together would add up to 28%. So really, from a local authority perspective, 28% comes for free. That's stuff that other people do for you, or is just done because of market changes. So if Sheffield was to set an emissions reduction target, 28% is we're not going to do anything other than just respond to other people's stuff. Right? But then the cost-effective investments would lead to 40% reductions in total. Recycling the revenue would lead to another 4% to 44%. And then the last one is where the city region would get to if you did everything that was technically possible based on these measures. And there are some measures that are not included in here. One of the big ones is promoting a kind of compact city. So we just said, keep the city as it is, and just imagine it just becomes more efficient, basically. if you promote compact urban development, flats and houses in city centre areas, you manage transport demand, and this leads to further reductions on top of that. And probably, if you want to get to a deeper carbon cut in time, you'd have to do that too in time. Nonetheless, 44% is a good place to start, or to aspire to in the medium term at least. So then the question is, well, that's a huge opportunity. Is it realistic? And here I'm going to zoom in on the domestic sector, on houses and people's household energy use. The background trends in this area are really quite amazing, actually. So between 1991 and 2011, in a decade, household energy use in the UK fell by 25%. So multiple reasons for that. Some of it is higher prices, some of it might be extra fuel poverty, but also as people's boilers are replaced, as their windows are replaced, as they gradually upgrade their homes, then their energy use gets lower. And the background trend, actually, I'm an advisor to DEC as well, and everybody's a bit baffled by that figure. It's true, but nobody really knows, including DEC, really understand the reasons why household energy use is falling so quickly. It's a huge kind of windfall gain, if you like, aside from the fuel poverty in poorer households. When you take into account then that energy supplied to the houses is becoming less carbon intensive, then household carbon emissions have fallen by 37% in a decade. So that's a big step in the right direction. However, domestic energy use still accounts for around a quarter of all energy use in the UK, so there's a lot further to go, if you like. When we look at what could be done, well, there's loads of stuff that you could do, but multiple reasons why most people don't do it. And I won't go through them, but lack of awareness, lack of information, skepticism that it's really going to work, lack of access to money, lack of trust in suppliers, all these kind of things conspire to mean that most people don't exploit all of the available opportunity. And then on top of that, what the research says, and again this is kind of based on real data, is that actually these measures lose about half of their potential gains because they're installed incorrectly or used incorrectly. So if you insulate a house, sometimes they don't put the insulation right up to the corner of the attic and you lose energy that way, and so on and so on. And some of the gains, potential gains, are also lost because of comfort taking or rebound effects, as we call them. So comfort taking is where you have a more energy efficient home and you consume more heating as a result. Instead of turning the thermostat down or keeping it the same, you take your jumper off and live in a warmer house. If you're fuel poor, you're not adequately heating your house already, then that's a good thing. You are in less fuel poverty as a result. But there are big questions around, whether people who are not fuel poor just consume more energy because it's cheaper per unit of heating, and I'll come back to that in a second. So there's a real question about whether this stuff actually works, and I'll give you an example now that will address that question. So Kirklees, Huddersfield, Kirklees Warm Zone scheme is one of the biggest retrofit schemes completed in the UK to date. It cost £21 million. Some of that was local authority finance, some of that was energy company money under something called the energy company obligation. The energy companies are obliged to spend money on addressing fuel poverty. It was initiated by the council. There's a political story behind it, but I won't go into that for today. And delivered by a company called Yorkshire Energy Services, a not-for-profit company, who actually coordinated the scheme, but it was just local builders and electricians and so on who actually did the work. Under the scheme, it offered free energy assessments and surveys to households, and where it was feasible, offered free insulation and some small-scale renewables, solar PV, air source heat pumps, this kind of stuff. There are 176,000 households in Kirklees, of which 134,000 had a preliminary doorstop assessment. So these are people who either were invited to do this or who chose to opt in, or who just had a cold call. A lot of marketing went with it, a lot of trust in the local authority, positive reactions to the not-for-profit company delivering it rather than a for-profit company, and lots of surveys around that kind of stuff. And of those, 111,000 had a fuller survey, not dissimilar to the Green Deal survey that you could get done now in theory. And 51,000 households had measures installed, of which some had loft and cavity wall insulation. So I think about 64,000 measures were installed through the scheme. Sorry, that's the next line, isn't it? I was right. And levels of take-up, interestingly, were even across lower, middle and upper income areas, which was good politically, obviously also in addressing fuel poverty. So we have just completed an evaluation of the impacts of this scheme. And what we found was that the impacts were much greater than were predicted, and therefore the savings we predicted in the Sheffield City Region report are probably an underestimate if the same kind of outcomes could be achieved here. So impacts were 20% higher in lower income areas. In other words, it was better at addressing fuel poverty, but it also led to financial savings for fuel poor households in lower income areas. So just on an equality aspect, and also on a public health aspect, that is a very positive thing. I'll come back to public health in a second. However, they were nearly double what was expected in middle income areas and more than double what was expected in higher income areas. The reason being that households in those areas were already adequately heated, and rather than turning the thermostat up and taking your jumper off because it was cheaper, and the surveys back this up, those households kept the thermostat the same or even turned it down a little bit and banked all the savings as an energy and hence a financial saving. So it was twice as effective as was predicted for middle and upper income areas. And what that meant was that the average annual saving was around £125 a year, or around 10 or 11% of the household energy bill. And when you aggregate that up for the whole scheme, the £21 million that was spent on that generates total savings of £6.2 million a year for the area and for the householders within that area. The payback is therefore 3.5 years and generated around 240 jobs. So all of that is higher than we predicted. It's a better outcome than the Mini-Stern suggested was realisable here. And over a 25-year period, and loft insulation and wall insulation stays in place for 40 years, so this is again quite conservative, that would mean that the £21 million spent generated 148 to 218 million pounds of savings in the local economy, some of which would then be spent again in the local economy, and the multiplier effect would be greater than the direct figure. The variation is because of different forecasts for energy prices in the future broadly. Low energy prices mean that the savings are lower, higher, as most people predict is going to happen, means that the savings are higher. Interestingly also, there are estimates now which say that for every pound spent on addressing fuel poverty, it saves the NHS 42p, because especially at peak times, levels of flu and illness relating to fuel poverty are reduced significantly. And this means that the NHS would save 62 to 91 million pounds from that investment. So add it all up, and in aggregate, it makes perfect economic sense to do this. The question is, how do you do it? Where do you get the money from to do that? Which is the next point we want to make. So for the housing stock in Sheffield needs, and I think this number's right, I was looking at it yesterday in the report, £800 million to upgrade its housing stock. Just to install the measures we evaluated in the Mini-Stern report. So, that's a lot of money, but when I say that Leeds City Region has invested now 160 million, or the finances in place to invest in a domestic energy efficiency programme. Birmingham has invested 100 million as a pilot scheme, which if it works will lead to 1.3 billion pounds being spent in the Birmingham area on domestic upgrades and building improvements. Then, it's not unrealistic. There are various cities which are absolutely doing this, at least in the early stages of doing it. So the question then is what's the business model? How do we get the money? And this graph will kind of picture on the left shows something called a revolving fund. And this is being done, this is kind of based on Birmingham's Energy Savers model. And at the heart of it is in techie speak, a special purpose vehicle. And this could be a community interest company. It can be a newly created body, company, a not-for-profit, owned by local residents, the council, the key players in the city, governed and kind of constituted just to deliver energy efficiency improvements and low carbon upgrades. So that can be created quite easily. The question is then, how do you finance it? How do you get some of the £800 million to give that community interest company the money to get going with this stuff? Well, there are a variety of ways. The first way would be to offer local residents community bonds or green bonds or climate bonds, they're multiply known. So you could sell basically shares in the company to local residents, and we'll see later that they would generate a return of around 5%. So pretty competitive with keeping your money in a building society. And you get community buy-in through that, and so the profits, instead of being taken out by a big institutional investor, some of them stay in the city region, which is another spillover effect. It can be a social enterprise. You could train people to do some of the retrofit work and create wider social benefits too. After you've sold as many community bonds as you can, then there is scope for the local authority to invest. And I know austerity means that local authorities are very strapped for cash, but Birmingham invested £75 million in the pilot scheme because they felt if they could prove it, it would then bring in £1.3 billion of inward investment, essentially, to the area. Now, I don't know how many inward investment opportunities there are of £1 billion or more in Sheffield, but I would argue just on economic grounds that this is worth pursuing. That would be the kind of level of pump priming or oil, wheel greasing that you would expect to bring in a huge industrial investment into the city. So why not do this for this? It's just as real an opportunity. And then after that, there are things like energy company obligations. Energy companies are obliged to invest in these kind of things. In Birmingham, they supply £25 million to fund exactly this kind of initiative. And then after that, there would be pension funds and institutional investors who, under the right conditions, and if you can get the risks down and prove that it works, would happily invest at that scale for a kind of nearly guaranteed return of 4 or 5%. So it's not unrealistic to think about raising that kind of money at all in this area. And then afterwards, what the diagram shows is the kind of flow of cash, or the business model for that community interest company. So it would have to have some money to run itself and to do all the marketing and that kind of thing. And then it would pay installers, all the local builders and electricians who would be retrofitting all of these homes. And then it would go down to the households, and some of the money would leak out through the performance gaps, the gap between the theoretical and the real energy saving potential, but that's much smaller than we found because of the Kirklees study. Some householders wouldn't repay the loans or the investments. The way you capture the kind of saving and recycle it is central. And here we have a model based on energy companies doing that, so this is rather like the Green Deal. The energy companies capture the savings. Some of them they give back to the householders. Here we estimate 25% of the saving goes to the householder as a reduced energy bill, and the rest goes back to pay off the costs of all the measures that are being installed until the end of that period, which is 6 or 7 years, and then the householder just owns everything and keeps all the savings. And then the remainder goes back into the community interest company and is recycled and reinvested. And the analysis shows even with really leaky systems, with loads of money leaking out of the system, this would reduce the £800 million figure to £600 million. So you would save £200 million by reinvesting the benefits. And then the whole thing becomes self-financing. Anyone who's bought a community bond, the company would buy it back over time after paying 5% interest for as long as you own the bond. And all investors would be paid, and the impact would be that all houses in the city region were retrofitted within 17 years, and the whole thing was utterly self-financing over a 30-year period. So some of this is optimistic, right? It requires some institutional investment and innovation to happen, but that's pretty much what Birmingham has done. It's pretty much what Leeds is doing. It's pretty much what Newcastle is doing. Reading, Brighton, Bristol, multiple other cities are doing something similar. And there is a lot of grant income around to set up feasibility studies and run demonstration schemes, with funding into the tens of millions to enable Sheffield to set something like this up, adapt it a little bit and get it working. What it needs is a little bit of time and a little bit of leadership and a little bit of support. And it can grow small, prove its feasibility, and then as it's proved to work, it can take off quite quickly. So, I think, in other words, that there are practical ways forward. They're not fully tried and tested, but they're near to being kind of commercialisable, and, it's well worth Sheffield doing this just for economic reasons, regardless of the social and environmental benefits.
Now for our next speaker, Professor Chego Maximism.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my great pleasure to, first of all, congratulate the Commission. I read the program and it's very ambitious. And I'm going to make a presentation to encourage you. My project is even more ambitious, but I think we can contribute and support each other. My project is called Blue Green Dream. Dream is something you have, you wake up and it's gone. This dream is designed to last much longer, maybe 50, 100, 200 years. And it's about cities in the future, livable, much more pleasant for living. And to reach this place, we have seen excellent presentation of Andy covering one sector, energy sector, covering UK. I speak about all other sectors and the whole planet. See how beautiful it is. Unfortunately, it is under big problem. It took millions and billions of years to create this planet. Last 12,000 called Holocene, when people started farming domesticated animals and so on, it's a geological period. And last 200 years, it took us only 200 years to start having enormously negative impact on climate and environment. And even people call this new geological period Anthropocene. Anthropocene is, you don't see it, it's a very small slice. And we have been very efficient in ruining all this beautiful planet. So we have to do something to reverse this trend. What we have now, I was in China last week, and they're taking it seriously. They are big polluters, but they're taking it seriously. So, what can we do here? Can we make this planet, can we first of all save it? It's predicted that, well, let's start with Charles Darwin. And we think we are here. Beautiful, you have all this comfort of cars and watches and TV cameras and everything, comfort, nice dresses, makeup and everything, ladies look nice, pretty. But we are not here, we are actually here. We are facing big problem and we have to do something quickly, and what is presented is brilliant example how you can do things at small scale in one sector, and if everyone else does, and in all countries, in all sectors, we can save it. So, we think we have a solution called Blue Green. So, why we do that? Well, temperature is predicted to rise at about 2 degrees by the end of the century in the planet on average. Anything beyond that, 3-4 degrees, creates irreversible process. We cannot fix the problem. Planet is in big trouble. What we have? Well, we have already enormous problems with the extreme weathers. We may have the same temperature, but it's concentrated in lower periods, higher temperature and lower temperature. Paris was unlucky, 2007, in which in 3 days, the temperature rose between 30 to 30 degrees. 47,000 people died. You will look at the internet, they say 14,000, but it is only central Paris. Large area, my colleagues from Paris University, 47,000 in 3 days. If you speak to French people, they say, oh, we know climate change is heat island. Well, it's not heat island, there are many other problems. So we are here. We are facing New York was, you've seen, Sunday and heat wave and cold wave and so on. So we are somewhere here. At the moment, planet Earth is consuming 50% more resources than what is sustainable. With all the trend growth business as usual, as Andy said, China and India, if they continue growing and as they are, and they don't change anything, and if sub-Saharan Africa increases population for 2 billion, which is predicted, we in the 2050, we are going to consume 2 times more than planet can afford. So we cannot do that. We have to do something now, and Andy's design is very similar to Andy's. We have to start changing our behavior in energy, but also in many other sectors, that by the end of 2050, we reach the balance between the natural resources, affordability, and so on. So, what problems we are facing? Well, flooding is a big problem. This is part of London which is designed not to flood maybe once in 10 years, but it's flooded every year a few times. Water pollution, it's the water shortage. This part of the country was during the Olympic Games, before the Olympic Games, under heavy restriction. And this is supposed to be going to happen much more frequently and much more severely if we don't take it seriously. It's the air pollution. This is not China, it is Paris. It's the urban heat island. City of Athens has 14 degrees warmer temperature than the surrounding area. It is the noise. And then also, Andy has referred to these social problems. Once you improve the environment, crime rate goes down. Social conditions become much better. And also food. It is predicted we will have to produce 20 to 30% of the food in our cities in the future. And then energy efficiency, Andy has presented nicely, but our view of blue-green is much beyond just retrofitting buildings and reducing consumption. There are many other ways we can do that, and I will just mention a few of them. And in the end, we hope that our cities, by the, let's say, 30, 40 years, will look much better. Sheffield will probably look not only greener, but will have many other environmental benefits. So, London, at the moment, is losing every 10 years 2.5 Hyde Park equivalent of green space. And that is official data from the London Eco Centre. I don't know what the situation in Sheffield, probably not that drastic, but it is happening all over the.
And you applied the same criteria of stratigraphy and of other changes of Earth processes, would you say we're in a new era? And the answer is yes. That's not a happy moment, by the way. This is not, yay, humanity. This is, oh my God, what are we doing?
Jeffrey Sachs had a presentation 1 hour in LSE. I suggest you download it, it's on the internet, and listen to him. It's serious warning, and I've just taken 1 minute. It's not, oh my God, what are we doing? And we have to do something serious. So, Jeffrey is an author, one of the key authors of the Sustainability Development Goals, is the key document of the United Nations. The Sustainable Development Goals, which has 17 points. I have just listed a few of them, most of them dealing with water. I'm water engineer, I'm civil engineer, but I've now learned a lesson that we have to do much more beyond our own narrow areas of expertise. Well, clock is ticking, bells are ringing. We have to do something serious. We have to do it now. Well, the future is not what it used to be. How the other people are doing? Well, let's take German people. We have in our project German partners, and they like guidelines. Whatever they do, they say, let's develop the guidelines. This is one of the German guidelines. So it's the guidelines how to deal with the reduction of the rainwater, surface runoff, and flooding. And so, well, to be or not to be, as Hamlet said, question now. We say to be GD, blue, green, green, or not to be GD is not the question. And they presented what can be done at household level, and we think this, everybody has to do something. It's not the question. Every household, every Mrs. Brown's bedroom to the city, to the country, have to do something seriously, and this is an excellent example that is achievable, that money can be brought in, and we can. This, if you take just example, we design our systems, let's say sewer systems for 5 years time period, and spillway and dam for 1,000 years. Climate change is, it takes just one event in statistics from the past doesn't hold anymore. You'll see later. So we have to do something, we have to invest much more money. Nobody has that money to invest what we call a rich man's solution. Let's build bigger dams, bigger dikes, bigger. Dutch people are now increasing their dikes from 1,000 years to 10,000 years in time period. Well, it's very expensive. The solution is only this limited amount of money. When we invest in something, we try to look at the multi-benefits. We try to see if we are investing in water or energy, can we with the same pot of money get some other benefits? The answer is yes, and this is the only solution. Multifunctionality, multidisciplinarity, and I'm going to show you how we do that. This is a diagram for London. This is GLA, London, Great London 30. Systems designed to last, to function over a 50 years period are now performing 20-25 years. So if you design something not to be flooded in 50 years, it's now being flooded every 20 years. It's going to be flooded more frequently and more severely. And this is a general trend, not in London, not in the UK, it's all over the world. And this is, we have to do something seriously, and the answer is we cannot afford rich man's solution because nobody has money. We cannot go poor man's solution. Poor men invest in something and it then fails. We have to look at the wise man's solutions. And this is wise man's solution story. We thought that we have a city with water, sewer, and drainage, and we are well off. No, unfortunately, we have all these functions, and they dysfunction. So the Australians have come with the water-sensitive city design, and we are embracing water-sensitive city design. And Blue Green Green is not only about water; it's about energy, it's about biodiversity, about other sectors. So we start with the water as a blue element: urban water, water supply, drainage, treatment of wastewater, and so on, and interactions with the green spaces. In the past, we had architects and landscape architects, energy people, transportation people, all working in silos, not even talking to each other often, in even the same consulting company. Unfortunately, this doesn't go anymore. We have to learn how to talk to each other before we start doing a big project, retrofitting, reconstruction, new design, and so on. And we have to bring on board all other experts: energy, biodiversity, carbon capturing, transportation, air pollution, noise. And this project is about creating tools and methodology and demonstrating that this method works. And it is the only sensible way and financially affordable way that our cities in the future can go through all these retrofittings or new cities, new developments built. There are quite a few in London, which are few billion. Elephant Castle, 5 or 6 billion. Earl's Court, or Old Oak, and so on. They are all few billions developments. If they are done differently than in the past, it's huge saving. If they are done business as usual, they just create a new energy. So these are 4 countries we have in this project: France, Germany, Netherlands, and the UK. I'm coordinating this project, and we have achieved quite a lot so far. I'll show you, we are now creating European regional centers for implementation of this philosophy in cities, in consulting companies, in individual developments at the individual household level, and we are now spreading this philosophy, gospel, all over the world. I was in China last week, and they are taking it very seriously. They want to create a blue-green center China and have blue-green center in each of these, 40 provinces. In 2 weeks, I'm going to Canada, Vancouver, which is considered to be the greenest city in Canada. Consider they can do much more with this more integrated, more robust philosophy. Well, where is the trick? It's nothing revolutionary new. It's not rocket science. We have our house, and Andy has presented nicely how we can do a lot of things simply in energy sector. We can do a lot in water, in food, in other ways. We take a lot of less potable water. We use 40% of it just flushing the toilet. Why don't we flush the toilet with the rainfall, which we collect from the roof, at least in the periods when there is rain? Or with grey water, which is, you take a shower, we can flush our toilets, and immediately, not only we reduce potable water consumption, we reduce energy consumption for pumping this water and for pumping this wastewater and cleaning that waste. So just simple little things. So we have a lot of flow of horizontal flow of resources, energy, water, heating, and we generate a lot of waste and send it downstream, our downstream neighbor. Recycling is just one element of it. So the philosophy is replacing this horizontal flow of resources by as much as possible vertical flow. We can capture solar energy and photovoltaic. We can store this energy. Next speaker will speak about storage. Capture in summer and store the energy in the rock. And we have seen a project. And then recover this energy back for heating in summer. That means heating and cooling can be provided at 20% of cost, which we now pay for electricity, and using alternative locally available sources, and so on. Water recycled, grey water recycled, and rainwater recycled, and food produced in a house makes our houses completely different. And we have seen that by Andy's prediction in 15 or 20 years, every house will do something with insulation. Well, Other measures, including water and waste and all the things which are part of the sustainability, will also have to follow, and they also have to have similar model. It's green facades. It's not just in the past people make it just look nice. It can be used for treating water, biodiversity, thermal insulation, food production, and so on. Multifunctionality is the key issue. We collect rainwater and wastewater and we mix it. It's much more difficult to treat. If you keep them separate and separate them where it is not separated, we are now creating new resources. Wastewater is a resource. California is facing huge problem these days, water shortage. My colleagues from Stanford University have got 100 million grant to come up with a new strategy. There's no other solution. Simple. City is a catchment area. Every drop of water is a resource. Capture it, recycle it, wastewater. And that is the only answer for this huge problem of California. And if you do that with energy, and Andy has presented a lot, but I'm expanding this bit, we can capture and restore it underground. We can recover energy from the sewers. In Berlin, we are now using sewer water to heat the whole library, and then dump the hot air in the summer again to sewer. So humble sewer is just a heat source and a sink for waste. And then if you do that for heating and cooling and flooding, everything, every little bit of urban activity has huge potential by implementing this. Now, humble tree, how many trees Sheffield is planning to plant? You hear these figures of millions and so on. Well, every tree which is planted should be done differently. If tree is planted in a small pot, a small reservoir, it captures rainwater, it reduces flood, it reduces pollution, it has this water for evaporative cooling when in the summer hot air goes up. Cold air is a new resource. Cold air, we can use it in design and manage and design new cooling systems with this humble tree. But it has to be done differently, and that is already taking place. So evaporative cooling, greening, and so on, biodiversity. Again, we need water. Trees are dying in cities. We need these bees and insects for pollination, and they need water for support. And this water is not unlimited resource. We have to recycle what we have. Food production is already mentioned. We're working with the university in Zurich. They already have experimental fish farms on the rooftop of their houses, which farm fish, and it costs 20% of what you would pay for the fish in the supermarket, and you have it alive in your house. So, and it is not nothing. It is already commercial product. They sell this fish farms on the roof, and people from Saudi Arabia already buy massively. Okay, so food production on the facade, on the roof, and the cellar, and so on is again something. If you go to Detroit has collapsed. Economic collapse because of the car industry. People were poor. They started city farming. So Detroit is now a big city farm. It is possible. It is not nothing. And then in the end, we hope we will have our city. So I presented the philosophy how all these bits or pieces, which are simple: water, energy, air pollution, noise, biodiversity, all bits or pieces. Each of them has an element to improve sustainability. I'll give you a few examples. All these topics we need some research, we need some innovative models, we need some design tools and German guidelines and so on. We have about 17 doctoral students in our 4 universities in France, Germany, UK and Netherlands, and we are developing new tools, but we are not waiting for these PhD students to create their Bill Gates companies and start making big money out of this. We do it today. We can offer city council in Sheffield somewhere integrated city development based on the Blue philosophy by bringing all these icons together, but paying very big importance to the group of people like your commission. I'm very much positively impressed by what you have in mind, and I would strongly support you, and I would very much be happy to come to do something with you. But this is the way to go. You cannot, these things don't happen by itself. There are a few examples already how we do with green roofs and facades and experiment different types of plants and different methods of analysis and different planning tools and so on. So key here is planning of new development, retrofitting from the one single bedroom house, group of houses, district, development, city, whole country, planet. We need different types of plants. Some of them are better for absorbing heat, some are better for reducing noise and so on. And I'm going to skip some of the slides. This is the biggest blue-green experimental facility at the University of Paris, and we are working together with them in developing new methodologies for predicting floods, for reducing heat island impacts, for improving the irrigation with recycled water, and so on. And also, we have to tackle problems of urban lakes and energy. Every water body can be used for extracting energy and storing energy, and you can replace some of the energy by using these natural systems. Then this humble area in the street, this is not just a green area, this is a factory, this is a filter which improves, reduces flood, improves water quality, reduces heat island, and so on. And integrating the whole city, we can have then much lower impact of the urban heat island. We're developing models how the green spaces reduce the negative impact of the urban heat islands, and coming up with the innovative solutions for planning, retrofitting, and designing new cities. Key element, this is key diagram. This is how the designers and planners do at the moment. Energy people, water people, biodiversity people, and everybody runs his own show. They're not talking to each other here in the same company. Well, we have to come to different way of communicating with among the specialists, and this is how we do it. Bringing together architects, landscape architects, energy people, transportation, economists, lawyers, all together. We agree on the multifunctional, multidisciplinary concept, and then we implement it. Our solutions have to be much lower energy consumption, much lower bills for water, energy, heating, cooling, much healthier environment, much lower NHS bills, and much better, much more pleasant environment and better property value of these things. This is an example how things should not be done. This is a new area in London, designed, and just after 2 days of looking, we found out that 40% of energy could be saved if it was designed differently without any extra investment. See, these facades are facing south, warm in summer, and trees are on the other side of the street. If they were planted here, these trees would create natural walkway, and so on. Collecting water and throwing it away to meet the flood criteria there. And then key issue here is optimizing these functions in a city and coming up with the new solutions. I'm going to skip some of these slides because there's a lot of technology. I'm over time, yes. So essentially, key to your commission is when you are dealing with the new developments, key is the multifunctionality. And I'm going to give you just an example. New university campus we designed in Croatia using vegetation only and energy storage from roof. 64% of energy less consumed for heating and cooling using the natural processes. And first blue-green city we designed and being built in Singapore. This system has no storm drainage. All the rainwater is captured, recycled, and used for recreation and so on. So I'm going to stop here. I would like university campus at Imperial to become blue-green hub. It's a big bureaucracy. It took us 2 years to just build one green roof. Sheffield University has green roof center. It's excellent. And thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Chendo. If I can say that, I hope you don't mind my first name. And last but not least is Charles Kirklees, who's going to talk about energy storage and clean fuel.
So, yes, I'm Charles Kirklees from ITM Power. I'm ITM in Sheffield. We're a Sheffield company, and I'm the marketing manager for ITM. I'm going to talk to you about energy storage and clean fuel. Harnessing renewable energy using a device called an electrolyzer that splits water into hydrogen oxygen by electrolysis. And I'm going to explain why this system is so useful and why it can apply to so many different sectors in terms of decarbonising, air quality, and overall sustainable benefits and economic benefits that, in particular, Sheffield, as we're here, could benefit from. So I'm going to chat about hydrogen, I'm going to chat about energy storage and why, and the hydrogen cars, the fuel cell cars that are available, and the infrastructure that's required to support them, which is very much at the heart of our application of our technology. So, we're a Sheffield company, we employ 70 people. We're at 2 locations set in Sheffield. We're on Atlas Way, and we're at Lettsby Avenue, next to the airport that isn't. We're just about to take on the lease of a third area, which is on the Advanced Manufacturing Park, where we have a refuelling station that's going to be operational in May. So filling up, making hydrogen on site using the power of the wind to fuel up vehicles that can drive around with clean emissions. And so that's very exciting. We're an engineering company with a manufacturing business model. So there you see a picture of our factory floor assembling our bits and pieces. We're getting busier and busier and expanding that facility within the footprint that we already own. We're getting increased interest in our products that we're now selling. So, hydrogen. Well, it's a chemical energy vector, hydrogen. In fact, fossil fuel is, if you imagine, it's hydrogen in a carbon bucket. The useful part of fossil fuel is the hydrogen. So, traditionally, it's made from steam form natural gas, and it's shipped and in a liquid form and to its marketplace, be it industry, or be it for the early trials of fuel cell transport. What we're doing, we're making it on site at the point of use by electrolysis in systems called electrolyzers that can utilise renewable energy either directly or indirectly via the grid. So you can make your fuel on site with a zero carbon footprint.
Excuse me, can you speak up a little?
Sorry, yes. So this is our electrolyzer system in the middle. So we can couple either directly to wind or tidal or the sunshine, PV. It doesn't matter what quality of energy can it feed into it. It'll harness it and convert it to hydrogen. Or it can be connected to the grid, and it can behave as a balancer for the grid. So when the wind blows at night and it's in surplus and demand is low, we can harness that wind which is otherwise turned off. That's becoming a big issue. It's called curtailment. And wind curtailment is costing the electricity consumer a lot of money because we pay for that wind to turn off at night. And it's not exactly a great selling point for renewables, and it's doing a lot of damage. So our concept is, well, instead of turning off that wind, you turn on an electrolyzer and harness that surplus electricity and make fuel. The problems with renewable energy deployment are experienced when you exceed that 20% capacity, or 8% by energy in a country. And Germany, Denmark and Spain have experienced that and are suffering real problems in what to do with all this surplus energy. There's only so much you can export, and it's often exported at negative cost. So the economics of being able to store your electricity and make a fuel are improving. Because the issue is, and the reason why we turn off the wind is because it's difficult to turn off your traditional power plants because of the time it takes to regenerate that electricity. And you don't know how long the wind's going to blow for because it's unscheduled. So at the risk of turning something off, you could lose power and have a blackout. So the costs for balancing services are forecast to be enormous moving forwards. And this is the system we turn on. It's a containerized solution, and it can be used either for fuel for cars or for long-term energy storage, where we're converting electrical energy into chemical energy and injecting into the gas grid. It's called power to gas. And power to gas offers a big opportunity to connect the electricity grid with the gas grid, with the electrolyzer that acts as a direct transducer. So it's enabling you to inject hydrogen, the energy vector, and mix it with natural gas and distribute it in the gas grid. Because the gas grid is 4 times the size of the electricity grid in terms of energy. You could also mix the hydrogen with waste carbon dioxide and make methane and synthetic methane. The technology's there. So there are a lot of storage, energy storage technologies, and they differ between the storage capacity and the discharge time. So on the left you have the small amounts of energy, small amounts of time. Batteries are ideal for starting a car. But with batteries you don't separate power and energy. So your physical size of your battery is linked to the time at which you can store that energy for or use it for. With pumped storage and compressed air and hydrogen, you're separating power from energy, which gives you a lot more flexibility. But the issue with both compressed air storage and pumped storage is you've got to wait for that store to discharge before you recharge it. And if you're actually trying to harness renewable energy whenever it's generated, when it's surplus to demand, you can't afford to actually always discharge before you recharge. It's not practical, it's not possible. So power to gas and hydrogen is the technology we have, and the electrolyzer is just the converter. So we're using an infrastructure, storage infrastructure, that we already own, we've already invested in, and we don't have to wait for it to discharge before we recharge it. So it's all very well talking about theoretically wonderful ideas, but where's it demonstrated? Well, our plant is the first system anywhere in the world to be demonstrated and to be injecting hydrogen into the gas distribution network. And this was a sale to the Tuga Group, which is a group of German utility companies. There are about 100 in all. It's an enormous conglomeration of utility companies in Germany, vertically integrated, so they deal with gas, electricity, transport, telecoms. And the Tuga Group bought our system to undertake a pilot project to demonstrate the concepts, test the technology, its robustness, its efficiency, the practicalities of harnessing and converting that wind electricity into hydrogen and injecting it into the gas grid. So there in front of you is the system. The container, you just plug it in to a water supply and electricity supply, put on hard standing. And next to it is a gas mixing plant. So the hydrogen that's made by the electrolyzer then goes into another box and is mixed with natural gas and injected into the gas grid. And from a perspective of the first of its type, the Tuga have invested in a visitor centre which attracts politicians, it attracts utility companies globally. It's a real lighthouse project, and it's been going on for the last 18 months now, and Tuga are getting more and more excited by it. They've started to issue press releases on the performance, on its technical capability to enter into the secondary power market, which means it can balance the grid. And that increases the the economic viability because there's another cash flow. So not only are you making hydrogen, but the way that the system performs, you can turn on and off and has a rapid response. And that's very important because you need to be able to turn on and off very quickly at the demand of the power grid. It's called providing a demand-side service. And in the UK, we have a tariff that National Grid operate, which is frequency control by demand-side management. So you can be paid to be on a standby to turn on or standby to turn off, and you make fuel. This is an idea of some of the electrical input. So the blue line is the input from a power station that's there to have essentially been trying to push it to its limit in terms of the poor types of energy it can throw at the system. And the orange line represents the response. So you see that on the right you have a wave profile. Sorry, not a wave profile, a wind profile. So a typical wind turbine, and it shows how the electrolyzer modulates up and down. You can actually modulate in 0.2 seconds. So it's a very, very rapid response. So harnessing energy as much as efficiency, the conversion. And with respect to system efficiency. TUG have also announced the system efficiencies, which are in the high 70s. So it's a very efficient way of actually making fuel. And on the back of that, there's another sale, this time to RWE and Westnet, and this is installed at Iberüren in Germany. So the learning you achieve through the first deployment, you then produce a second generation, which is has greater throughput of hydrogen and performance. In the UK, we've been on a number of studies which we've led, which have been financed by the Technology Strategy Board, and one of which was called Grid Gas, which we partnered with Shell, SSE, and National Grid, and that was evaluating the concept of power to gas in the UK and where the optimal areas would be. And we're also working with National Grid and AMEC, in terms of different sites for power to gas. But in terms of the market size and the opportunity, I point you to this report, which was commissioned by the FCHJU, which is an EU funding body for hydrogen and energy storage projects. And it was undertaken by McKinsey, and basically it outlines that the big opportunity for power to gas and the role of electrolyzers, especially PEM electrolyzers, in enabling that to happen. So, clean fuel, moving on. Cars. What is a fuel cell car? Well, essentially it's an electric vehicle, but it's been enabled to have range and faster refueling. So it's got exactly the same powertrain as a plug-in vehicle, but instead of plugging into electricity that's spontaneously produced, you refuel it with stored energy that was made at a time when it suited the grid, when electricity was in surplus, when it was at lowest cost, and when it's greenest. So you can fill up this car in 3 minutes, you have 400-mile range, and it allows you to go about your usual routine, your business and social routines without disruption. And that's key to the rate of adoption of low emission transport. And the emissions are totally clean. You just get water vapour. And in terms of the number of companies involved and the cars that are available, the leaders have been Hyundai, that launched a car last year. Toyota followed, and these are commercial production cars, I should add. They're not prototypes. These are cars that you can lease and buy. So the Hyundai cars, we've got one in Sheffield that we refuel and nearby, and that car has all the power whenever you need it. And it's so quiet you can actually have a meeting in the car. It's actually quite extraordinary, actually, especially my hearing. But all the car companies, you've got Hyundai, who are going to loan. Nissan have teamed up with Daimler and Ford to share technology. Toyota, they're sharing their fuel cell technology with BMW, and Honda and GM are likewise. Honda are releasing their cars to sell next year. So these are a serious vehicles that are arriving. In terms of why this hasn't happened already, well, we needed the cars, but we also need the infrastructure. And I'd say we've been part of the UK Mobility, which is a government industry consortium set up to evaluate the rollout of cars and refueling infrastructure in the UK. And you'll see there are a number of flags at the bottom there, which just shows the global interest in being the first to actually grasp this opportunity to set up an infrastructure and get the car companies deploying cars, because of the jobs and economic benefits that are associated with that. So the plans for the UK are setting up from 2015, 65 stations, moving up to 1,000 stations by 2030, by which time we'll have 1.6 million cars, fuel cell cars on the road. So it's a serious, and it's been backed by funding commitment from OLEV. So the first million was announced in April. So apart from a number of stations. We looked at the station sizes, the early sizes, so you optimise the capital that you spend to utilise to fill up the vehicles. If you don't want redundant capital, we know only a few cars. So the stations are sized and the layouts agreed, and in terms of what's compliant and with other traditional forecourt operators. In terms of where the stations will be, initially there's going to be a focus on the London area, but with focus on trunkways as we move forward. And one of the big advantages Sheffield has is that it'll be one of the first cities to have its own hydrogen refuelling station. So it'll really put Sheffield and Rotherham, I should say Rotherham as well, because the AMP is on the Advanced Manufacturing Park. So South Yorkshire will have outreach to all over the country with these vehicles because of the range they'll have. This is a project where we're deploying 3 stations in London, which was a pan-European project with a number of different countries and the car companies, where the car companies are putting down about 50 cars in London and will be installing 3 refuelling stations as part of this project. In terms of Sheffield, the Advanced Manufacturing Park, it's going to be opening in May, although we're going to have a launch a bit later on in the summer. And this will be South Yorkshire's chance. The reason the refuelling station was able to be located here was, initially it was going to be on the Isle of Wight. It was the idea was to, and the way we were able to get the funding was because we teamed up with partners, collaborative partners, to evaluate and to deploy a smart grid of energy storage, being the hydrogen. So we worked with Toshiba, IBM, and SSE and Vodafone. Smart comms to really show what a system operating in a smart way could enable an island to do in terms of self-sufficiency of fuel, but utilising renewable energy. The actual customers were few and far between on the Isle of Wight for the cars, and we thought it would be a great opportunity to actually move it up here and engage local fleets who will be able to lease the cars for trialling over the next year. In terms of local clean fuel, I put this slide in. I don't normally do it, but it does actually show the various applications of hydrogen fuel cell transport. I dealt with captured fleets at airports, distribution, materials handling, your forklifts, your pallet trucks. We did a trial with Marks and Spencer's at Bradford, their warehouse distribution depot, in 2012. And it was the actual economic benefits and the operational advantages that the system was able to deliver, as well as making fuel on site, and the environmental and air quality benefits. University campuses, there's Nottingham, we've got a station of ours on the university campus, which was an EU-funded project. We undertook hydrogen on-site trials in 2012, which were engaged across 6 industrial sectors and depot-based fleets. So we work with DHL, councils, utility service providers such as Amy, and a number of infrastructure companies. And we took it to the Isle of Man, it went to the Isle of Wight, it's been to London. We took it over to Germany, it's been operating from Handler Messe with fueling buses. So in addition to your traditional national infrastructure station, there are a lot of opportunities for return to base operational fleets that make their own fuel. So in terms of business planning, in terms of depot planning, in terms of being able to locate local fleets in urban areas and how to tick the clean emission box, which is a particular advantage in the current planning issues. So in terms of other funding, I mentioned UKH Mobility and the High Five. OLIF recently announced results of a call where we're deploying a further 2 refueling stations in London. So we'll have 5 operational by the end of the year in London, and the upgrade for one of the AMP to 700 bar, which enables you to get the full range on the vehicles. And then there's the longer plan for electric mobility. In terms of Europe, there's been funding available for hydrogen transport and energy from the FCHJU, and we're very active in working with other countries and industrial partners to secure that funding. In California, we have a company, an ITM Power Inc., which is based in California, where we're deploying 2 stations this year, one at Hyundai's headquarters in Chino, and one at Riverside City in Los Angeles. California is, not surprisingly, right up there in terms of the dishing out benefits and incentivizing the transport. You can lease a car for $500 a month with fuel, and away you go. In terms of energy storage, they've also mandated 1.3 gigawatts of energy storage that utilities have to actually put aside. So there's a bit of joined up thinking going on, and there's other initiatives in Canada as well. Everyone not running my time.
2 minutes.
2 minutes, okay. So these are the stations that we're either operating, commissioned, or in build at the moment. So most of those, all but 2, are in the UK, so there's a lot going on. But whether it's power to gas or whether it's transport, it's the same technology platform. So we've invested all the non-recurring engineering costs. We've got the kit is compliant across the world in terms of operation in Germany, where we have to deploy kit under the scrutiny of German engineers. It's compliant in the States, again a whole different set of standards and scrutiny because it's imported kit. And these are very, very large markets, and so it's extremely exciting. But the key for me, and I always finish with this slide because it's a joined up picture. It's what this technology enables you to do for clean air in cities. And we've heard about the impacts and costs of pollution at a recent cleaner air conference in Sheffield a couple of weeks ago, and it was quite staggering the costs of diesel pollution in the cities. But it's the only real way to actually deploy clean transport without disruption to routine. And if we want people to adopt clean transport, we don't want hurdles. And this technology doesn't have hurdles. You just need the infrastructure, and you just need the cars, and they're all coming. You can make it on site. There's no need for a fuel tanker. You make it where you need it. And in terms of economic development, there aren't many cities that actually have a hydrogen industry. So I think you can really put Sheffield and South Yorkshire on the map. Thanks very much.
Right, now we've only got 10 minutes because Heather has been trained. So I think the commissioners now are going 15. As good as 15. Lovely, thank you. Please, guys. So the commissioners are now going to question our 3 guest speakers. And if you could indicate to me if you have a question and try and keep it as brief as possible so we can get through as many as possible. Have you got questions about our commissioners? Beatrice, then Francis. Beatrice?
Yeah, in California there's a huge water shortage, as you mentioned, but millions of gallons of the water are being polluted by the fracking industry. Millions more are being bottled by Nestle. So how do you help solve the water shortage when you've got a commercial interest who are working against it?
This is not only a sector which has commercial interest. The main reason for the United States has not addressed the CO2 emission is not that people are not aware. 80% of people in the States are aware of the problem for years and years. But government is under strong lobbying of oil and gas industry, and now fracking is another bottling industry. I'm very much against fracking, and I'm very much against bottled water. You pay for this water, I don't know, pound, and you pay pounds per cubic, which means pay 1,000 times more cost. So the only way to make this is public opinion commissions like yours, and to have the common people heard and pushed for change of the attitude. First time in history, American President Chinese shook hands 2 months ago, and they admitted something is going on. Something is very serious. How much energy will Barack Obama have to pass all these legal documents to the Congress, which is under strong influence of oil and gas industry? So yes, you're quite right. There are problems, and they have to be solved. And key to that is the bottom up.
Which commissioner is it addressed for?
Well, the question's addressed to Andy, but you could probably reframe the question in different ways, probably for the other two speakers as well. And it's really about getting the ball rolling on such an exciting proposition. So you mentioned, and because of shortage, glossed over, that there are barriers to getting people involved and barriers to making the investment. But my question really is, who's best placed, and it might be a combination of players, to demonstrate to a city or a city region like Sheffield City region how the business case stacks up, how you overcome those barriers, and it's particularly about getting the investment in, so the business case for the investment. Who do you think really needs to demonstrate leadership and get involved?
I think it could come from public sector, but I know local authorities are strapped for cash and under pressure from lots of different directions. It could come from the private sector. There's a money-making opportunity here with some demonstration schemes and kind of proof of concept stuff and all of that to come. But honestly, I think the civic sector is the logical place for it to come. Social enterprises are booming. This could be a classic social enterprise. It can start small and scale up as more money comes into it. But in a way, I suppose the community interest company could be a bit of a blend of all of those things. It could be jointly owned and governed by the public, private and civic sector. There are funds available. At the European level, there's something called ELENA funding from the European Investment Bank, which has supported things like this before to the tune of millions of pounds, if not tens of millions of pounds. I think there's a lot to be learned from Leeds and Birmingham, who've had a go and perhaps made a couple of mistakes in various ways along the way. But the scale of the opportunity is sufficient, and the risks, I think, are low enough that you could get it working with a small grant, and then it could grow very quickly from there.
Thank you. So perhaps what we're hearing from that is maybe the civil society, if you like, could take the first step and then probably try and bring the other sector players in.
Could the Green Commission form a working group on how to get a community interest company up and running and how to start applying for funding?
I think from our point of view, we're selling systems now. We sold a system to European Marine Testing Agency up in EMIC, and that was sold to store tidal energy so they could expand their tidal base. We're actually in the marketplace. So our systems, fleet end users can try the vehicles at the branch manufacturing plant this next year, and if they like it, they can buy it. So, but I think city support, more stations, that would help an awful lot.
My question is...
Sorry, I just wanted to ask if Chair answered first, and then Stephen, and then yourself. Yeah.
I think a similar reasoning applies to how to fund this green development. There's already a lot of money being put in development, and maybe not in such energy efficient and environmentally way. It takes only, I think, the city planning institutions to be a bit more restrictive to issue permits to the developments which do not meet this criteria. Developers are not interested in being energy efficient, whatever. They say, we don't mind if the people who live there pay higher energy bill, water bill. We are interested in selling our property as much as possible. Well, such properties should not be given permits, at least unless they prove that they meet some more stringent criteria.
Right, Stephen's question.
It's really a question for Andy and for Charles, really. In your presentation, Andy, you were saying about the growing interest and the demand for regional or sort of localised energy generation. You talked about the small-scale wind. And tying that in with what you were saying, Charles, about the opportunity for using surplus energy. I appreciate that there's got to be a synergy of cost and availability, but listening to the two presentations, it seems to be an ideal opportunity for something for the commercial side of the industry to be looking at. What could be done about improving the performance and the efficiency of small-scale local energy generation by the application of other technologies such as the power to gas, where it can be utilised for either grid gas or for transport fuel. It just seems a marvellous opportunity and something that we could look at developing the technologies in unison.
I talk mostly about the domestic sector, but the non-domestic sector is about equivalent in size, and in some ways is potentially an easier nut to crack, because you're not dealing with hundreds of thousands of households. You're dealing with a smaller number of large estate owners often, and I think the opportunities to integrate small-scale renewables into commercial developments or into public sector developments are perhaps more readily accessible. And you look at the number of schools that are adopting solar PV, or hospitals, or multiple other small-scale renewables being integrated across the public building sector stock. I think that's kind of evidence of that. I think there is this threshold issue, and the kind of peak load management or load kind of balancing aspects, and energy storage plays a really important role in that. I hadn't quite realised it was so advanced actually. Yeah.
I mean, I'm just trying to add to that, is in terms of district heating plans, as well as transport, as well as, I mean, it's all about fully utilising what we actually buy, and to get the maximum value out of the energy. In an ideal world, I'd like to think that people think of wind and solar renewables, not just delivering electricity but fuel, because it's energy, but in a different form. And I think that there are projects, both on small scale but also large scale, that's a benefit.
Our final question this evening
was for you, Charles, and I agree with your last statement as well, which is we need to make use of all the technologies available, and a really good start would be that transport sector. The real advantages of the electrolyzers and the fuel cell technology is that the refueling stations can make that energy on site. So it's locally produced again, which is perfect. The challenge, or one of the major barriers for fuel cell vehicles, is the same one that for a lot of new technologies in transport, which is what's been termed range anxiety. People don't buy them because they say, there's one brilliant refueling station up there on the advanced manufacturing park, and I don't know where the next one is, which is a bit of a problem. And you have to, a leap of faith is required by some brave individuals right at the very beginning. How are you hoping to work with others to tackle that problem? Because I think once we tackle it, actually the rest of it should take off all by itself.
Well, one of the best ways is local business and the community inside the orchard to actually look at a number of stations and a cluster and to get that familiarity with the fuel. It could be return-based fleets, utilising those refueling stations, so people work with the vehicles at work, in their workplace, and take on the idea of what a fantastic car that was. I think in terms of the national framework, in terms of working with governments, in terms of the car companies, and actually rolling out stations that make sense, you have to actually coordinate with the car companies where the stations are going to be in the early years, which also represents a big opportunity in this area. If you've got a refueling station or two, you will attract the car companies to supply cars.
Thank you. I think we'll make that our final question because it's nearly 25 to, and I just want to thank the commissioners for coming this evening and to thank our 3 guest speakers, which I found absolutely fascinating. It was lovely. But absolutely, really interested me, and really got my. I can't wait for us to go in our little room now and have our little chat. And thank you very much